What's up, nerds? Welcome back. I know that everybody's getting ready for Thanksgiving, but let's talk about vampires again with DC versus Vampires number 2. So, if you remember basically what we have going on, if you can't really tell from the cover, Green Lantern is like one of the vampires and shit, and the main one that we're seeing at the moment. But basically, DC is having this whole. I'm assuming this is an alternate universe where they're having vampires starting to take over because Mary, Queen of Blood, was taken out or she died in some way, and now, like, the vampires are just like, you know what, there's nothing holding us back. Let's go ahead and start feasting on all of humanity. So. Andrew Bennett tried to go and like get a warning out to people, and then he was killed, but not before he was able to get a letter to Batman. So he was killed by Hal Jordan, and that's actually where we're picking up, where Hal Jordan has now come to Anton Arcane, who's here doing some sort of like ritual or meditation or whatever, and he starts talking out loud saying like, did you really think that you were going to be able to sneak up on me, knowing that I am one of the masters of like the dark arts and shit like that? So Hal Jordan even tells him, like, no, I didn't think that. And we can see where Anton is just, like, all of a sudden surprised. And he says, I just didn't care, Anton. So he starts trying to, like, cast spells to, like, repel him and shit. And it almost seems like he might be able to do something, but no. It turns out he can't because Hal tells him, your magic is very strong. You might even be the strongest I've faced yet. But I'm afraid my will is stronger. And then we see where he literally rips his spine out on some Mortal Kombat shit. So he just kind of like throws that off to the side. And then Hal Jordan hears from his own master. So he like drops down on his knees and he's like, Master, I didn't know you were here. He says, stop. We're not doing all that. I'm here because we have a problem. So he says, whatever it is, I'll deal with it. So he says, you say that, but this problem, or I'm assuming it's a he. Anyway, he says, you say that, but this problem arose because you failed to deal with the last problem. Andrew Bennett. He was in the wind for a week before you finally got a hold of him, Hal. We have no idea where he went or who he spoke with. So he's just saying, like, I don't think that he talked to anybody. And the master says, I don't care what you believe. We need to assume he told people our plans. Maybe they won't believe him. He was always a raving lunatic after all. But someone will talk. Enough whispers can turn into a roar. Suspicions will spread. Your job is to keep those suspicions pointed away from us. You have to keep the superheroes distracted and distrustful of each other. The last thing we need is the wrong person figuring out who we are. So, as we know, Batman is someone who already knows, well, not who they are, but he does know more or less what's going on. So then we go over to Batgirl, who's just out here kind of like sunbathing when Dick Grayson walks up on her. And I do have to comment, what is this stance that he's doing? I realize she's looking up at him, but what is he doing? How is he standing? Whatever. So they kind of start going back and forth, and then they kind of just have like a little playful detente, and then all of a sudden she's asking like, but seriously, why did he bring us all here? And then we see where Batman is just kind of standing there, and he tells her, yeah, he doesn't know. I didn't tell any of you why I brought you here. He just tells them like, I need you to come inside and everything, we're going to handle this. So they're all sitting around in this room, still not really sure why they're here. Dick even says like, weird time for us to meet, isn't it, Bruce? Because it's daytime. They normally obviously meet at nighttime. It's Batman. So Tim Drake is also there, and he says, and weird place to meet. Not that we all couldn't use the vitamin C. So Batman tells him, like, well, yeah, this is part of the plan. Why we're here is part of the reason, and also Alfred made some tea. So Damian takes it upon himself to be like, all right, fine, if nobody else is going to say it, I have to ask. Why is the crazy one here? So we go over to where Tim Drake is saying, like, telling Alfred, I thought he was the crazy one. And of course, Alfred has to tell him, like, well, I would contend that you could all do with some therapy and shit like that. So Batman starts telling him, like, I was visited by Andrew Bennett. Well, Andrew Bennett came to the house looking for Batman, and he had a note. I'm pretty sure he knew to come to my house because Lex Luthor told him who I am. And so that's when Dick is just like, wait a minute, how? Like Lex Luthor? And then Batman tells him, like, yeah, that's not the thing I'm upset about. What else is going on is a much bigger problem than that. So he says, I didn't speak with Andrew. I was away at the time, but he left a note with Alfred. The contents of that note are why you are all here. So when Alfred brings the tea over to Barbara, she's like, you don't have anything a little bit stronger? So I don't know if she was asking for alcohol, but if so, my girl, like, I appreciate that. Anyway. So she's saying, like, I'll see what I can find, Ms. Barbara, but I suggest you try the tea first. It packs quite a kick. So Batman tells them, I attempted to track Mr. Bennett after he left here. He was making great efforts to cover his tracks, and I believe he was being followed for at least part of his journey. But I know he was headed to Washington, D.C. Then his trail went cold, and I have found no trace of him since. Likewise, I can't find any trace of Luthor in the past 2 weeks. No one on Earth has seen him. So this is where Alfred brings the tea over, or he takes the cup over to Damien, who says, I don't drink tea. And he tells him, like, don't worry, I took the liberty of preparing you cocoa, and I made sure there are marshmallows in it. So Batman goes on saying, like, Andrew Bennett's letter claimed that the vampires are preparing to wage war on humanity soon. He says, there was a coup in the leadership of the vampires, and the new powers don't seem to share Mary Queen of Blood's belief that our fragile detente has value. I now believe our centuries-long relative peace is over. And that's where we go over to some villains who are just kind of sitting there talking about, like, it's weird. There's a whole lot of weird stuff going on. Like, a lot of our own are being taken out. And they're kind of surmising, well, the girls are kind of surmising, like, maybe it's the heroes. Like, they're actually taking us out. But he's trying to tell them, like, no, it wouldn't be the heroes. Like, they don't kill us. They don't hunt us down or anything like that. So he's saying, like, it has to be something else. And so she's asking, like, something else? What does that mean? We're hunting ourselves? So then this other one, Everyman, is saying, like, he's saying, this is a joke. Nobody is hunting us. So that's where he's asking him, like, well, then where is everybody going? If you're so sure, then you were supposed to bring, like, 2 other people. Where are they at? He's like, well, I couldn't find them, but that doesn't mean anything. So we can even see here where Red Hood is saying, like, but you haven't seen any direct evidence of, like, the vampires coming out. And Batman says villain activity is down across the country. He says, well, they're criminals. They hide. So that's where we see here somebody was coming up on this meeting of villains. And if you can see, there's a green arrow sticking out. So obviously it's Green Arrow. So Batman tells, like, his little family, their secrecy makes them perfect targets. We wouldn't know they were gone until it was too late. So Red Hood just says, so you think a bunch of villains are secretly vampires hunting other villains? He's like, well, it's not necessarily a villain we're looking for. So this is where we see Green Arrow comes out. He tries to tell them, like, look, calm down. I'm not here to fight all of you. I just came to talk to y'all. So, of course, what's his name? Brick, I think it is telling him, like, nah, screw that. Like, we're going to handle this right now. So he shoots an arrow into his head. He's like, look, I said I didn't come here to fight all of you. That doesn't mean that I can't. So anyway, he says, I really just came here to basically talk to y'all, because what I have to say is going to sound completely batshit crazy. And he tells them vampires have been infiltrating the metahuman community, converting or killing anyone who could fight back against their war on humanity. So they're asking him, like, well, what the hell are you talking about? And he says, one of you is a vampire. So they look at each other, and the 3 of them start laughing, but we see where Everyman doesn't start laughing, because Green Arrow even asks him, like, isn't that right, Everyman? So they all start laughing. He just keeps looking the same, and they stop laughing because they're like, why isn't he laughing? And then they find out when he all of a sudden hisses at them and bares his fangs and shit. So they're like, oh crap, and try to get them away from him. So he tells Green Arrow, like, you're gonna die and everything, and then he goes to lunge at him. And if you will remember, one way to kill a vampire is to stake it through the heart. So obviously Green Arrow is going to be perfect for that exact method of killing. So he shoots an arrow straight through its heart and causes it to turn into dust. So he tells them, like, you aren't safe. Start protecting yourselves. So Brick is asking him, like, or no, the girl is asking him, you really think there's a human vampire war coming? He's like, no, it's already here, lady. So he takes off from there, and then we go back over to the Batman family, where we can see Barbara is asking Dick, like, do you think he's joking? To which Dick is like, well, he doesn't joke. She's like, well, yeah, but we've never seen him joke. So maybe this is like what it would be like. It definitely seems how it would be like if he were joking. So Batman has to tell her, like, no, I assure you, I'm not joking. Years ago, I encountered a man named Nikolai Tepesh, the Mad Monk. So he's saying this was before most of your time. Dick will remember his female counterpart, Dala. And of course, Jason comes up and hits him on the back of the head. He's like, yeah, I bet he will. So he's like, stop. So Batman tells her, like, basically, yeah, she wasn't like some sort of romantic fling or whatever. She was under the command of her leader and shit like that, and she did a whole bunch of killing for him. So he's like saying, I wasn't judging him. Everyone's got their type. Anyway, he says, the Mad Monk was my first encounter with the supernatural. I was younger, naive, but he was almost my last. Since that day, I've approached every supernatural fight the same way. I don't expect them to go well. So he's saying, like, at the time I knew him, if he had the will, the Mad Monk's powers and insatiable hunger made him a threat to the entire human race. I fear now my suspicions are on the verge of being proven correct. So Jason's saying, like, so you think that the Mad Monk is behind this? He's like, I don't know. The truth is that after a week of investigating, I have no idea who we might be facing. The best we can do is make educated guesses on who they'll go after. They'll hunt metahumans, of course, to which Cassandra Cain is basically asking, like, well, which ones? So they all kind of start surmising who could possibly be next up on the list. Jason Todd says villains first. They're able to go to ground for prolonged periods of time, so we wouldn't really know if they're missing. Barbara says they'd need to take out telepaths and psychics, anyone who could figure shit out mentally. Dick says magic users, that's a weakness for them too. Tim Drake says they're susceptible to sunlight, so he's like, I'd totally kill people like the Ray and Dr. Light. I mean, if I was one of them. And then Batman says, we shouldn't just be thinking of who they'd kill. Who would they convert? So that's where Damian says, like, it would be young heroes. If that's what I would be doing if I were running them, like, I wouldn't have any old dudes in the group and shit. To which Jason's like, yeah, I'm sure you would, little man. So where does that leave us, Bruce? So that's where Bruce is telling them, like, well, basically, at the moment, we don't actually know how far their reach is. For all we know, they've already started infiltrating the Teen Titans, the Outsiders, the Birds of Prey, or it could also be the Justice League, but he says, but getting up to a member of the Justice League initially would be too difficult. They'd use the younger heroes to get to the old dudes, as he said. So that's where we go over to. If you remember, we had Jaina and, God, I can never remember the other one's name. I don't really care that much about the Wonder Twins. But anyway, in the first issue of this, Hal basically blended up her brother, her twin brother, one of the other Wonder Twin. And then he started drinking like his gore, but it just wasn't to his liking, so he poured all the shit out. So she comes in like asking all of them, like, have you seen my brother? Because I haven't been able to find him, and I'm not able to feel him anymore. So that's where Booster Gold is sitting there. He's like, well, maybe he just decided, to go far enough away to where you wouldn't be able to feel him. I'm sure it's got to be weird always being felt by your sister. So she's just like, oh, no, it's okay. Well, Howl, of course, is still up here pretending that he's normal and tells her, like, hey, it's okay. Like, don't worry, kiddo, and everything. I can go with you if you want to go look for him. She's like, no, Mr. Gold is probably right. I just have to go. So, as soon as she leaves the room, they all kind of like crowd around him, and Plastic Man is like, dude, he's like, what? I mean, for real, like, am I the only one who's noticed they spent a lot of time together? And before I turn this page, I just want everybody to notice, I see you, Otto Schmidt. Yeah, I see you with that ass shot on Wonder Woman. Props. Anyway, so let's keep going with the story. And we go back over to the Bat family where Jason is saying, so if literally anyone could be a vampire, why do you trust us? And Barbara's looking at her cup. She's like, he does it. So Damien kind of puts it together and he asks, did you poison my drink and shit like that? So Batman tells him, no, that's not what happened. He says, no, Damien, I did not poison your cocoa. All of your drinks were made with holy water. If you were a vampire, it would have burned you. Likewise, we're meeting in the sunroom instead of the cave so we can all see that the UV light coming through the windows isn't hurting anyone. Now, if you'll all follow me, I have something to show you. So, but before they leave, Damien asks Alfred, like, can I get another cup of cocoa? Mine's spilled. So he's just like, yeah, of course. So I'm going to stop right here and kind of just mention, I do like that they're kind of relying on the old school type of methods for, killing and hunting vampires, holy water, stakes. We're about to see in a second where they're going to hold, I think he calls it a crucifix. Someone calls it a crucifix. No, they just call it, just this. So he basically has them all hold a cross to kind of show that it's not going to burn them. Because that's the next part. Like, they come out and they're trying to, like, formulate a plan. He's like, okay, before we go any further, I need everybody to hold this. So they hand it to Cassandra. She's fine. Hand it to Tim Drake. Fine. Dick is fine. I think Barbara is probably the closest to what would be my actual reaction if I were in this situation where she gets the cross. She's like, this is actually lovely woodwork. I was like, damn it, Barbara. Can you stop being a nerd for 2 seconds? But like I said, that would probably be my reaction too. Like, I'm Catholic, so I love going to like old churches and shit and just looking at the architecture and the artwork and everything. I love that shit. Other people think that it's creepy. I find it very calming, but that's a whole other video. Anyway. So they hand it to Jason. He's like satisfied because obviously it didn't burn him. And then I like Damien's reaction too, where he's just like, everybody needs to stop looking so surprised when I pass these tests and shit. So we could see, I don't know if you could tell from here, but Batman even kind of has a little bit of a smile where he's just like, okay, good. He's not one of them. So he goes over to this whole arsenal. He's like, all right, now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to introduce you to the new tools you're going to have to be using for this particular mission. So they're asking, well, Barbara asked, like, these are going to help us catch the vampires. It's like half measures aren't an option anymore. We aren't trying to catch them. And then Dick asks him, like, so what, you're expecting us to start killing now? He's like, no, you can't kill them. They're already dead. So, of course, Damien is all excited and shit. So, that's where we go back over to, out after they've all left, I guess, or they're all somewhere else in the mansion or whatever. Now he's sitting there talking, or he's just kind of thinking, kind of strategizing, and Alfred's there and decides to start sipping on his own tea very loudly. So Batman asks him, like, is there something else, Alfred? He's like, oh, I apologize. Was my sipping tea bothering you? He's like, it's fine. So he says, I wanted you to know I'm having the tea. So he's like, good. And he says, I'm assuming my not being asked to drink it was merely an oversight on your part. And he's like, well, of course. And then he also tells him, like, oh, and by the way, I also had the boiler blessed. So if you were to be a vampire, you would have burned to death when you took a shower earlier. So he's like, oh, how thoughtful. So he tells him also, like, I have to, like, mention, you didn't inform them of the vial of Lex Luthor's blood you'd come into possession of. So he's saying, putting your trust in someone else is always a gamble. I trust them, especially after today, but the fate of humanity is at stake here, and that's not mine or anyone else's to gamble with, because if you remember, Lex Luthor's blood is apparently able to kill these vampires. We don't really know how yet, but we know that it is capable of doing that. So then we go over to the final scene here where there's this beach and the Flash is kind of just like doing some cleanup or whatever the hell. So he was apparently waiting on Hal, who finally shows up, and he tells him, no, I just got here a minute early and figured I'd do some good while I waited. So he was picking up trash on the beach and shit. So he's like, yeah, it looks nice. And he tells him, like, go ahead and take a seat. So he's like, all right, well, if we're going to do this, then you take a seat first. And he comes and kind of like hobbles something together for him to sit on. So they sit down and they start talking. And Hal is telling him, like, listen, I need to talk to you. I needed to talk to you someplace I thought no one would be listening. Something bad is coming, Barry. This is fate of the world stuff. Who lives and who dies. And a lot of people we care about aren't going to make it. So he flashes basically telling him, like, well, yeah, that's never really a guarantee in our line of work. So he says, this time it is. Has anyone talked to you about this? Bruce, Clark? And then he's like, dude, I don't even know what we're talking about yet. So he's like, yeah, sorry, I start to ramble when I'm nervous. And he says, we've been friends a long time. You trust me? So he says, of course, Hal. And then he says, I trust you too, Barry. I know that if something bad happened to me, you'd be the first one on my side. So he's like, yeah, same. So Hal tells him, I would. I really would. And when something good happens to me, I want you there with me, right? So he says, well, something good did happen to me. Something wonderful. And I wanted it to happen to you too. So we see where he starts binding Barry. And at first it seems like, okay, he's about to try and transform him. But then he starts explaining to him, I tried. I argued for them to let me turn you. But they said, no, with your metabolism, you would have enacted a genocide. You would have, drained the entire world dry. Just because if you remember, the Flash consistently needs to be eating because his metabolism is so fast, he burns through energy really quickly. So he's constantly eating shit all the time. And that's why he's saying, with your metabolism, you would have had to drink the blood of literally everybody probably pretty quick. So there wouldn't have been enough for everyone else. So he starts restraining him and says, they said that you would drink the planet to death. I argued for you. I knew they were right, but I argued. They wouldn't let me turn you. So he starts trying to vibrate his way out of this construct, and he's like, oh yeah, I forgot just how strong you are whenever you're actually unrestrained. So, or whenever you really cut loose. So we can see where he's taking this thing and he's making it smaller and smaller to, well, he's basically able to stop him from moving at all. So he's trying to tell him Hal, this isn't you, listen to me. So he says, no, Barry, this is me. And he tells him to wait. And then we see where he just snaps his neck. And I'm assuming that Hal now cries tears of blood, because you can see there's blood leaking from one of his eyes. So I'm assuming those are his tears. Anyway, he says, I'm so sorry, Barry. I wanted to conquer the world with you. And I was like, all right, gay much? I was like, that was very sentimental, but all right, I get it. They're very close friends. So it was like, I wanted to conquer the world with you, best friend. It just kind of came across as a little bit weird. Anyway. Overall, the story was it was entertaining. There wasn't a whole lot of action in there. Yeah, we started out with a nice action fight, and then there was a denouement with the whole I guess conversation. I was going to call it an argument, but it's more just a conversation that Bruce had with his Bat family. And then we ended on a somewhat of a grim note with the Flash being killed now too. So we'll see how that's going to play out in the coming issues, how the Justice League is going to react to the fact that, okay, one of the Wonder Twins is gone. Now the Flash is gone. Something is going on here. So we're going to see how that continues to ramp up But I mean, overall, I'm enjoying where the story is going. Like I said, I really wish they would have put this series out all throughout October. That way, it would have just like it would have really cemented the whole like spooky season. Now we're into Thanksgiving, but everybody is basically already in Christmas mode, so it just kind of feels mismatched for the season. But whatever, I enjoy a good horror tale, whatever time of year it is. Doesn't really matter to me. So yeah, I think that's about all I can really say for this particular issue. I am excited to see where it's going to go. I just hope it doesn't end up letting me down because I do love vampires. I always have, so I'm willing to keep checking it out. But if you've read this, even if you haven't, definitely feel free to share your thoughts with me down in the comments below. I always love to hear from you guys. But also, if you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and hit the like button. If you didn't, well, you can hit the dislike, but it's not really going to mean much of anything. So anyway, I make sure that you are subscribed as well. Hit the notification bell. That way you know when I put out new content for you guys to watch. And if you would like to share out the video, I appreciate it from the bottom of my cold black heart. But if you're done here, then go and read a book. And if not, then I will see you on my next video.